I tried to start kick him. My kick just go to the halfway, and he fit already on my face. Like that. I'm just like that. And then, what do you say? I said, you're really fast.
At 74 years old, Sammo Hung still gets asked the same question everywhere he goes. What was Bruce Lee really like behind the camera? For decades, Sammo gave short answers and moved on quickly because he preferred to keep his memories private. But now, he is finally speaking out about what really went down between them. And the truth is not what we all initially believed. The ultimate rumor. If you have ever spent any time looking up old martial arts movies online, you have probably run into one very specific story. For a very long time, a major rumor has circulated in the film community that Sammo Hung and Bruce Lee absolutely hated each other. Many tabloid newspapers and early internet forums claimed that these two men had a bitter, violent rivalry behind the scenes. The rumor went so far as to say that they got into a real, bloody backstage brawl, where Lee physically beat up Sammo to prove who was the true boss of Hong Kong action. People loved this story because it painted this picture of two proud warriors fighting for the crown of the greatest martial artist. But you see, the gossip columns in the 70s loved to print stories about big film stars fighting in real life. And this story was the biggest of them all. People genuinely believed that Sammo, with his incredible size and strength, had challenged the speed of the legendary Little Dragon, resulting in a backstage clash that left one of them injured. It became a piece of folklore that movie fans whispered about for generations, and for a long time, neither man did much to publicly deny the gossip. But as it turns out, the rumors were completely wrong, and what Sammo Hung actually revealed about their real relationship is totally different from the gossip. In fact, the truth is much more interesting than any fabricated story about a backstage fistfight. Two different paths to greatness. The journey to that famous meeting started with two very different young boys who grew up in completely opposite environments. Sammo began his training at a very young age when he entered the China Drama Academy as a 9-year-old. This school was not a place for normal childhood play. Under the strict rule of Master Yu Jim Yuan, the children woke up before the sun and spent the entire day doing painful physical drills, acrobatic flips, and stage combat. The punishment for any mistake was immediate and physical, which taught young Sammo how to take a hit without showing any fear. He was so incredibly skilled that he became the leader, or big brother, of a group called the Seven Little Fortunes, which also included young boys like Jackie Chan and Yuan Biao. During those intense school years, Sammo developed a reputation for being protective of his younger classmates. He would often use his own pocket money from early movie appearances to buy extra food for the other kids, who were often hungry and exhausted from the brutal training schedule. This role as a protector and leader built a deep sense of responsibility in him, making him a naturally confident and authoritative figure in the Hong Kong film industry before he was even 20 years old. While Sammo was learning how to work within a strict group, Bruce Lee was busy breaking all the rules in his own neighborhood. Lee was a restless teenager who spent his free time running with street gangs and getting into fights on the streets of Hong Kong. After a particularly bad rooftop fight in 1958 that ended with police involvement, his family knew he needed to learn some real discipline. They placed him under the guidance of the legendary Wing Chun master Yip Man, where he learned the basics of Kung Fu. But his rebellious nature did not stop, which eventually forced his parents to send him away to America to start a new life on his own. These two young men were walking down completely opposite roads, but their paths were about to cross in a way that would change martial arts history forever. The ultimate test of speed. It was during the year 1971 when Lee made his grand return to Hong Kong to work with Golden Harvest Studio on what would quickly become the legendary movie Fist of Fury. At the exact same time, Sammo was already making a decent name for himself at the studio as a hard-working stuntman and a young fight coordinator. Naturally, everyone on the set was talking about this incredibly fast new star, and Sammo was very curious to see if the guy was actually the real deal. One afternoon, while they were both just standing around on the set between takes, Sammo decided to walk right up to Lee and ask him a very direct question. He wanted to know if Lee was truly as lightning fast as all the hot rumors in the Hong Kong film community claimed. Now, a lot of people might have taken that kind of direct question as a threat or an insult, but Lee was never the type to back down from showing off his skills. He looked Sammo dead in the eye with a big smile and asked him if he wanted to see that legendary speed in person. Sammo agreed, thinking they were just going to do a slow and friendly demonstration where he would have plenty of time to prepare his hands for a block. But before Sammo could even begin to move his physical body or raise his hands, Lee threw an incredibly fast kick that stopped perfectly just centimeters away from Sammo's face. Sammo was completely frozen in shock because the foot had appeared in front of his eyes out of nowhere. He immediately realized that he had never seen anyone move with that kind of explosive speed. So he smiled and praised Lee on the spot. Obviously, Sammo did not get angry or try to start a fight to protect his reputation. Instead, this playful test of speed became the foundation of a very strong friendship that was built on pure respect. They were not competitors trying to ruin each other, but rather two passionate young artists who wanted to learn as much as possible from one another. In fact, they grew so close that Sammo started paying very close attention to how Lee handled his favorite weapons. He wanted to see if he could mimic the fast movements of the master when nobody was looking, proving his own incredible talent. The secret of the nunchaku. The mutual respect between Sammo and Lee quickly grew into a very close friendship, where the two fighters would constantly share ideas about martial arts. A perfect example of this closeness involves the nunchaku, which was the weapon that Lee made famous all over the world. Sammo had never trained with this weapon before, but he spent hours on the set of Fist of Fury, secretly watching exactly how Lee moved his hands and wrists to control the wooden sticks. Now, most people would assume that Sammo would ask Lee for private lessons, but that was not how things worked between them. Sammo did not want to bother his friend during a busy shoot, so he decided to take a completely different approach. He went home to his own backyard, picked up a pair of wooden sticks, and practiced the movements alone for about 30 minutes, until he had completely figured out the trick. Sometime later, Sammo was teaching another young actor how to use the weapon, and the actor was so impressed that he asked how many years of hard practice it had taken to learn such difficult moves. When Sammo told him that it had only taken about half an hour of practice, the actor thought he was joking. This just shows how incredibly smart and observant Sammo was, but it also shows how much he looked up to Lee as a teacher and a friend. The magic of the Enter the Dragon set. The close bond of friendship between them is the exact reason why Lee made sure Sammo got a spot in his biggest movie ever, the legendary 1973 hit Enter the Dragon. If you go back and watch the very first scene of that film today, you will see Sammo playing the young monk who spars with Lee in the wide temple courtyard. What is really wild about this opening fight is how incredibly modern the whole thing looks, even though it was filmed over 50 years ago. Both of them were wearing very small, padded gloves with open fingers and simple dark shorts. This looked absolutely nothing at all like the traditional robes or loose pants that people usually wore in old kung fu movies. Their gear looked exactly like what professional fighters wear today in mixed martial arts matches. The way the fight ended was also highly unusual for that time period. Instead of a big flashy kick or a dramatic punch, Lee actually put Sammo into a tight armbar submission hold to finish the match. This move was from judo, which was something movie audiences back then had never seen on screen. Many fans consider this scene the first time mixed martial arts was shown on a movie screen, long before the sport became popular. To make the opening exchange feel as authentic as possible, they focused heavily on the smooth flow of the choreography. The fight was designed to show a complete range of combat, starting with quick hand strikes and head movement, transitioning into a clean sweep, and finally ending on the ground. Every single block, kick, throw, and lock had to be perfectly synchronized between them to prevent any real, bone-shattering injuries on the hard temple floor. They had to make the struggle look incredibly painful and real to the audience, yet remain perfectly safe. You might think they spent weeks practicing this scene, but that is not how it happened. Sammo has explained that they did not do any formal rehearsals before the movie cameras started rolling. On the shoot day, they simply sat down together on the dry grass, talked through the choreography for a few minutes, and quickly went to work. They filmed the entire sequence in just one single take, which is almost unheard of for action movies. This was only possible because they had built a deep level of trust in each other's physical abilities and reflexes. Sammo knew that Lee was not going to accidentally hit him, and Lee knew that Sammo could react to his lightning speed with perfect timing. And even though Lee had a reputation on set for being an extremely intense and demanding boss to work with, his attitude was totally different when he was around Sammo. The very second the director called out for the cameras to stop, Lee would instantly transform into a fun and light-hearted friend. He would start laughing, telling silly jokes, and hanging out with the stunt crew on the grass. The fact is, working so closely on that set gave Sammo a front-row seat to watch how a genius made movie magic. He spent his time watching how Lee carefully calculated the camera angles and the split-second beats of timing to make every single hit feel real to the audience. This valuable experience changed the way Sammo choreographed his own fights for the rest of his life, setting him up to become a legend behind the camera. The painful road to Concord production. While they were having a great time making movies in Hong Kong, Lee was also carrying the emotional weight of some very painful rejections from his years in America. Before he found massive success, he had tried extremely hard to get the leading role in an American television show called Kung Fu, playing a Shaolin monk who travels through the American West. Lee wanted this role more than anything and felt he was the absolute perfect person for the part. But the big studio executives at Warner Brothers ultimately decided to pass on him. They decided to cast David Carradine instead, a white actor who had no martial arts background. It was widely reported that the executives were simply worried American audiences would not accept an Asian lead actor who spoke with a strong accent. This painful rejection hurt Lee deeply, but it also made him realize that he could never rely on Hollywood to give him a fair chance. He decided to stop waiting for their approval and return to Hong Kong, where he teamed up with the head of Golden Harvest, Raymond Chow, to form their own company called Concord Production, Inc. This company gave Lee the absolute power to write and produce his own movies exactly the way he wanted, without any corporate interference. Around this same time, he also made the difficult decision to close down all of his physical kung fu schools in America, even though they were very popular. Lee explained that he did not want his personal philosophy, Jeet Kune Do, to turn into a rigid, commercialized business with fixed rules. He believed that martial arts should always stay fluid and personal, So he chose to teach only private sessions to small groups of selected students instead. Sammo watched his friend Guptus go through these intense professional struggles, and he saw how much stress Lee was putting on his own body to prove his worth to the global entertainment industry. This extreme dedication to his art was inspiring, but it was also pushing him toward a sudden tragedy that would shock the world. The sudden loss that shook the world. All of that immense pressure and endless work came to a tragic halt on July 20th, 1973, when Bruce Lee passed away suddenly at the young age of 32. The official medical cause of death was listed as cerebral edema, which is a sudden and severe swelling of the brain that took his life in a matter of hours. This terrible tragedy occurred only a few weeks before Enter the Dragon was set to premiere in theaters. It meant that Lee never got to see the spectacular film that would finally prove his genius to Hollywood and make him a global superstar. The sudden news of his death was a huge shock to the international film community, and the grief hit Sammo incredibly hard. Sammo has spoken about the deep sorrow of that loss many times over the years, explaining how heartbreaking it was to lose a young, loyal friend who still had so many beautiful dreams he wanted to bring to life. To make matters worse, the studio was left with hours of raw, unfinished footage from Lee's highly personal project, Game of Death. Rather than letting the footage go to waste, Golden Harvest decided to hire director Robert Close and bring in Sammo as the action director to help finish the movie. Sammo spent many painful months working with stunt doubles, lookalikes, and existing archive footage of Lee to somehow piece the movie together. The final version of Game of Death was eventually released in 1978, and it used creative camera angles, large sunglasses, and even actual footage from Lee's real-life funeral to hide the fact that the main star was no longer alive. It was an incredibly difficult project for Sammo, both physically and emotionally, because he had to choreograph action scenes for a friend who was no longer there to execute them. He did not take on this grueling task for the money or the fame. He did it because he felt a deep personal responsibility to ensure that his friend's final creative vision was shared with the entire world. Still talking about Bruce at 74. Today, Sammo Hung is 74 years old, and he is one of the very last living legends who actually knew Lee as a real flesh and blood human being rather than an idealized image on a movie poster. Over the decades, Sammo has gone on to build an absolutely massive career of his own as a highly respected actor, director, and action choreographer. He has worked behind the scenes on incredible films, including directing the spectacular fight choreography for the modern martial arts masterpiece Ip Man series. Even in recent years, he has continued to perform in major action blockbusters, demonstrating to the world that his legendary speed and agility have not faded with age. He still loves to talk about Lee in almost every interview he gives at international film festivals because he feels a profound duty to keep the true spirit of his friend alive. He wants to make sure that the younger generation of martial arts fans does not just remember Lee as a fierce, screaming warrior on a television screen, but also as the warm, funny, kind, and deeply philosophical man he truly was behind the camera. For Sammo, speaking out about these memories is the ultimate way to clear away the false gossip and show the world that their bond was built on genuine admiration and deep brotherhood rather than any kind of bitter, competitive rivalry. As the years keep passing by, fewer and fewer people remain who can share first-hand accounts of what the little dragon was like when the cameras stopped rolling. This makes Sammo's personal recollections incredibly precious, because not only is he keeping a memory alive, he is also protecting the legacy of a revolutionary artist who dared to change the rules of the game. So tell us, would you have loved to see these two legendary fighters face each other in a real match back then? Which of their famous movie scenes together do you think is the absolute best? Leave your answers in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoy this video, please click on the next one on your screen.